One of Iran's most powerful military commanders has just threatened to redraw the maritime map of the region. In a stark warning to Israel and the United States, IRGC Quds Force commander Esmail Qaani has unveiled a new resistance security belt stretching from the Strait of Hormuz to the Bab al Mandeb. Well, this is the very same corridor through which a huge share of world's oil, gas and trade moves every day. In fact, he says borderless fighters are now watching these choke points and vows that continued aggression will be met by the united force that can seize you up by the throat. So in today's edition of From the News Desk, we answer the question that lies at the heart of this escalating crisis. Has Iran just signaled that the world's energy lifeline is becoming a permanent battlefield? And is this also part of a broader strategy to strike at Israel's economy? Well, according to statements carried by Iranian state-linked media, Qaani says a new resistance security belt will be established from the Strait of Hormuz to Bab al Mandeb and from the Persian Gulf to the Red Sea. He frames this not as a conventional naval collision, but as a network of allied non-state and state actors along these coasts, coordinated by the Quds Force as the part of Iran's wider axis of resistance. While announcing this belt, Qaani explicitly praised Yemen's Houthis, calling their timely and powerful actions a sign of wisdom of the resistance front and hinting that others will join too. Well, this is consistent with long-standing Iranian strategy, using partners such as Houthis in Yemen and other groups in the Levant to project power and threaten maritime traffic at arm's length. In fact, analysts have repeatedly warned that the Houthis, who control much of Yemen's Red Sea coast, give Tehran a lever over Bab al Mandeb similar to the lever it wields in the Strait of Hormuz through its own forces. But in his latest message, Qaani links this new belt directly to deterrence against Israel and the United States. In fact, with this move, the Quds Forces is trying to formalize what was already emerging in practice, a more integrated, multi-front network stretching from the Gulf to the Red Sea, capable of coordinating pressure on both land and sea. The belt is therefore less a new alliance than an operational doctrine, threatening critical sea lanes as a shared battlefield for Iranian partners. Now, Qaani's message is tailored to Israel as much as to Washington. He accuses Israel of mischief in the region and warns that its action will be met with the reaction of the United Resistance Front. Well, this very message echoes Iran's broader response to the current Israel-Iran confrontation, which has already seen rockets and drone launches from Lebanon and Yemen in solidarity with Tehran. And for Israel, the threat is twofold. First, the maritime belt adds a new layer to the existing land-based encirclement created by Hezbollah in Lebanon, militia in Syria and Iraq, and Palestinian factions. If the Houthis or other Iran-aligned groups escalate at Bab al Mandeb, while tensions remain high in Lebanon or Gulf, Israel could find key shipping approaches and allied naval routes under pressure at the same time as its northern and southern fronts. Second is any disruption to the Red Sea would complicate Israeli trade and naval access to the Suez Canal, which is vital for its connectivity to Europe and beyond. Well, Tehran in simple words is trying to say that any future Israeli strikes on Iranian territory or high-profile assassination of its Iranian commanders will not be answered only in the skies or above Israel or in the Gulf, but potentially along the entire maritime corridor. Now, experts have already warned that Bab al Mandeb could become the next flashpoint in the ongoing US-Israeli war with Iran if Yemen's coast is fully activated as part of this broader Iranian strategy. Even if Iran's partners exercise restraint in the near term, the announced security belt keeps the threat alive and gives Tehran an escalatory card to play if the conflict intensifies. Now, Qaani's announcement matters far beyond the Middle East because it targets two of the most important maritime choke points on Earth. The Bab al Mandeb, at the southern mouth of the Red Sea between Yemen and the Horn of Africa, carries roughly 12 to 15% of global trade and around 30% of the world's container traffic towards and from the Suez Canal. In fact, as most of you now know, the Strait of Hormuz is even more critical for energy flows. Recent Iranian actions in and around Hormuz have already rattled markets and prompted naval deployment by the United States. And now, by linking Hormuz and Bab al Mandeb as a single resistant security belt, Tehran is signaling that it sees these waterways as connected levers in a broader confrontation, not isolated pressure points. And any serious escalation that interrupts shipping at both ends of this corridor would force tankers and container ships to sail around Africa's Cape of Good Hope, adding thousands of kilometers to the voyage and pushing up the transportation and insurance cost worldwide. But for now, many experts believe a full de facto closure of Bab al Mandeb remains unlikely simply because Houthi rhetoric has often outpaced their operational capabilities. But Iran's new steps makes it very clear that these choke points are no longer just geographical features. They are strategic weapons to be activated or restrained in steps with trajectory of war with Israel and the United States. Well, that alone is enough to ensure that every statement from Qaani and every move in Hormuz or in the Red Sea will now be watched as closely in energy trading flows in London and Singapore as in war rooms in Tel Aviv and Washington. And with that, it's a wrap on today's edition of From the News Desk. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm Yash Goyal signing off for Times Now Digital. For more such videos, keep watching this space.